Thank you everybody for being here. Got it. Okay, I'm pinned. Good. Is that looking good on your side? Oh, let's do this. Boom. Got it. Okay. Hello everybody. Thank you for being here on our Saturday morning. It is so difficult to get eyeballs and to, kind of try and get attention for this. And so I really appreciate that all of you are taking this time to do this. I know there's a lot of options that you could be doing, like sleeping in and whatever. So thank you. And, we were just talking, where are people from? Not where are you really from, but like, oh, are you from Shoreline, etc. I think it's so important to get to know who your neighbors are. And one of my plans in the future is to really figure out who's in the neighborhood and be teams of people who can help each other if there's a heat situation, if there's a natural some other catastrophe, how can we help each other? So that is the goal. And I will be speaking about Asian culture and through an Asian lens, but a lot of this really is pretty universal, just kind of slightly different for the other different groups. So I'm going to run this a little bit different. We've got a small group today, and I want it to be interactive. We are recording. You can use the chat, and then we are going to pause after each section. We're going to pause and ask you, what you think about it. You can I won't call on you. I don't think I will. I may call on Kevin or something, but I just want to hear your feedback. And if nothing, then we'll just go on to the next one. So I am Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish, and I grew up in the North Shore School District here in the greater Seattle area. And I felt the need to really put all my time, like every day, all day, into this because people don't know about that Asians are being attacked every day. And, I wouldn't know either until I'm researching it. And because our main news doesn't capture it. And it's not your fault that you don't know. It's not mainstream. People aren't feeding you it. And so thank you for being here because it is really devastating. And so with that, I'm gonna um, start. Have you think of a time where you have felt unsafe? Maybe you were on a trip and you're going to a big city and you go to the wrong area and you're like, oh, I remember I was in New York, well, many times, but there was a cop on each corner, and it was about 4 o'clock. They're like, you need to go home right now. Like you need to leave. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm out of here. And so, think of the time where you've felt unsafe. Well, that's a lot of us feel unsafe. Um, in normal life, I always feel safe. I go to Harlem, I go wherever I want. But nowadays, 2 out of the 4 times I walked around a Lake Forest Park, I had some situations and my aunt was followed for 10 minutes. And there's a number of stories that happen just in our neighborhood. So I think because you don't know about it doesn't mean that it's not there. So I'm going to share with you this right here. So there have been 9,081 hate incidents towards Asians. And this is it's not up to date, but still, that is a lot, 9,000. And this year, in a 3-month stint, there's 27 a day. And that's just a sliver of what is recorded. Some of you do know a little bit about Asian cultures, and it's not the culture to speak up and like protest and like, hey, it's really keep the heads down. I haven't reported mine. My aunt hasn't reported hers. I mean, I know a lot of Asians who haven't reported theirs for a number of reasons. And so this is just a sliver. And I think this is too many. And I'd like to share with you a video, and I do want to, some of you may want to turn your heads. It's a 1-minute video, but I think people are not aware of it. So I'm giving you a trigger warning. It is graphic, but I think it's important. It's not like I like to watch these things either, but it is happening. So we're going to share this right now. So these are, just a handful of the attacks. So what do we think of this? Have any of you seen any of these before? Does any reactions to that? Is it surprising? Um, Thoughts on that?
Hey, Jolene, this is
Yep.
Lenore.
Hi, Lenore.
Obviously the attack itself, the attacks themselves are very upsetting, but something that always kind of bothers me when I see these is the bystanders. I'd like to think I would intervene. I don't know that I would. I've never been in that situation, but it's so discouraging to see bystanders watching these things happen and not try to do anything.
Yeah, good point. And I know that when I go out, good luck. If I go out alone, you're on your own. I will not depend on anybody else to like do anything. And so I don't go out alone, but I think I have seen, I don't know, hundreds of videos where people are just staring. They're just watching. And even they're not even as violent as some of these, and they're still just watching. So in the chat, it's awful. It angers me, horrifying, horrible, scary, terrifying. It should not happen. True. It should not happen, and it happens all the time. So, and because people don't know about this, I am keeping a timeline. So on my website, I made a timeline of attacks. I think that New York Times just recently did an article that did a pretty good job, but mine's better. But um, I think this is a great resource. It's in the chat here because people are like, oh, so there was Atlanta and there was the Thai guy and then the other old lady who fought back and there was like the six things, but people don't know that this is happening every day. And so you can see for yourself and see the stories and where they come from. And because these stories don't make, I heard that Fox does play them. Of course, they're going to play all the videos that have Black and Asian. Um, and but a lot of the mainstream don't get these. I have to search for these attacks because it's not on the news.
Hey, Jolene.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too that I
Yeah.
think there will be also a certain segment of the population that would say, well, how do you know it was racially motivated? And there's this tendency sometimes to isolate people and say, well, that's just a person with a mental problem, as to minimize or even diminish what's really going on. And as we both discussed, racism doesn't have to be, you don't have to call people names while you're attacking them to be racist. There's all kinds of different forms of racism and how they play out. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And yeah, we'll get into some of that of, oh, that's just a crazy person, or that was just a poor person, or that was just and how many how many Asians need to be attacked for you to understand, yeah, it was racist. So so you may wonder, well, is it local? Is this really local? It's just probably in Chinatown in New York and San Francisco. New York and San Francisco, I mean, these are the biggest populations, but we're number 5, like in terms of how many Asians we have. And also the hate crimes, we are number 4. How many Asian hate crimes, anti-Asian hate crimes, we're number 4 on that list. Yet we never hear about it. So I want to let you know that this is not just in the big cities, it actually is here. And so incidents in Lake Forest Park and Shoreline, etc. And I'll give you a couple of these so you to kind of bring it home. And I have a picture of a cat and a dog here. So there was a cat. I don't know the name of the cat, but there's an Asian woman and her cat was shot. This is a few weeks ago. And then there was an Asian guy not in our neighborhood, and there was a man who didn't light the dog on fire, but threatened to, and then punched the Asian guy and racial slurs at him. You probably have heard of this one. This is in Shoreline, and this lady, was threatening this Vietnamese woman for I think a few years, and then recently this lady gets on this Asian lady's property and drops her pants and stuff. I'm not sure what's up with the right now with that, but there was nothing happening for a while here. So finally, there's a breaking point. The Asians do have a breaking point where they're like, you know what? I need to speak up and go to the police, et cetera. And so, and stick on it. And so this did make the news locally. And this was here in Kenmore. This is a reenactment. So picture an Asian family, a mom and a dad and a baby with their stroller. And this is the truck that was driving at them. And when I was reenacting this, even though he was 3 feet away, this is my friend driving, it was kind of scary. And this happened, and the victim, he's like 6 foot, 200 and something pounds, the Asian victim. And this is the neighbor who lives 2 houses away that drove at him. So you have the situation where it's not illegal. Nothing illegal was here. What are you going to do? You know, and this Asian was new to the neighborhood and that other guy is not. He's been in here for a long time. So you have this situation where it's not a police issue. It's kind of a neighborhood issue. So there's a lot of things like this where we need to be the neighbors and speak up. And then this one is Noriko. She's a Japanese teacher at Inglemoor, the school that I went to, and she was a guy put rocks into a sock and beat her, and she was with her white boyfriend, but went after her. And you probably have heard about this. So this is John Nguyen, Vietnamese man, and this is in Bothell, that nice little area right by UW and Cascadia, where this young white man came out and stabbed him in the heart and he died. So there's trying to make it a hate crime. I haven't followed up on it recently, but you know, the hate crime, you have to be saying something. So it's hard to prove. I also talked to the chief of police to ask, you know, if he was surprised that this Asian man was killed. He said yes. And I'm thinking, wow, I see stabbings almost every day. How are you surprised? And that is why we need to have these workshops and to educate people and city staff and police included, because they don't know, you know, and so it's really sad. We've got a lot of work to do. So what do you think about, and there's a number of other stories. I just want to give you an idea. This is local. What do you think about that? Is that surprising? Do you know, have Asians come to you? Do you know why they haven't? What are your thoughts on this?
Can I mention something that I can't prove it was a hate crime?
Yeah.
Or a hate-related incident, not a crime, but in Costco, month and a half ago, I was in line next to another line, and there was a young Asian family with 2 young children. They were busy unloading their cart, and the maybe 3-year-old was pushing the cart forward and slightly bumped into the woman in front of them, an older white woman. And she was all in their space and how she's got a bad back and how it was trying to force the child to say he was sorry. And it was awful. So I just supported the family and said that was just a little accident and he hardly bumped you at all. And then another person came behind me in line and helped support that family as well. But it was very over the top, very, very over the top. And I thought it was emotionally harmful to the young child. And the mom was in tears and she was apologizing, and it was really awful.
Well, thank you for standing up. It's so important. And you know, I hear so much silence, and so thank you. It's each person that says something, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yes, thank you. And welcome to Lori, Ashley, and Amy for joining the call. So let's talk about some of the basics here. So you can't solve a problem you don't understand. So I'm doing my best to try and educate people on what is happening and how Asians might feel and what to do as a non-Asian as well. Yeah. So, and the thing is, what I feel very strongly about, which I think people are not aware of, if you are neutral in the situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Desmond Tutu. Um, and silence is not helpful. So we need to figure out how to get around that. So with anti-Asian hate basics, so who are the targets? You know, we often think of seniors as targets. And yes, they absolutely are targets. I have seen so many Asians being stabbed. It's really like, really, do you need to stab a 94-year-old? Um, and oops, lost my mouse. And this was just kind of heartbreaking for me to see. This is a class in California, and these seniors, and like this lady right here. I mean, like these are like 90-year-olds. Can you imagine your grandma needing to go to a self-defense class? My grandma was like 85 pounds, and she could hardly, blow out a candle. I just the idea that there are a number of classes for senior citizens is just it's wrong. Um, and then women women, of course, are targets too. Yes, there's like a ton of women being attacked. But there are also men being attacked. Um, and you may think, oh, well, young people, they're really athletic. They're probably not targets. Yeah, they actually are also. So I'm not trying to be in here. Okay, well, anyways. And you think, well, not athletes. She's a martial art. This can't remember her name. I think it's Sakura. She's a martial artist for the Olympics. So she's karate artist. And so this guy was yelling at her. I'm like, wow, that is a bad idea. And of course, Jeremy Lin, basketball player. And we've got a couple of Japanese American baseball players. And then we have a gymnast here. And so they have all had, Asian hate spewed at them. So if you are an Asian, you're a target. So I think we think, oh, it's just our parents or grandparents. No, everybody is a target. I think people who have more money are in different places and have, are less likely because they have resources, but everybody is a target. And I put this slide in here because for, Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, I'm like, wait a way to start. On 5 days, woman is pushed on the subway tracks. And then next day, a woman is hit with a hammer to the head. And then the one you saw in that violent video, there was a man crashing the Asian lady's heads with bricks, and then man beats up an Asian father, and his baby was in the stroller. I'm so glad that baby stroller didn't roll into the street. And then Asian man punched out, and then on the 5th day, 2 women are stabbed, 85 and 65 years old. So that's how API month started. And, I just don't know how that's not upsetting. Like, it's upsetting to me. And I wish people would be more upset by this, because this is every day. Any thoughts around the targets? Were you surprised that it was like professional athletes too? Or like, were you surprised that it's local?
There was a question in the chat, Jolene, from
Yes.
Paul. It says, do we know if these anti-Asian hate crimes have increased significantly since the beginning of the last administration?
I would say, heck yeah. From the beginning, I don't know when they've been tracked. They Stop AAPI hate, that started during COVID, I think. to track that because there was so much hate towards Asians because they're blamed because the last administration talked about Kung flu and China flu, et cetera. So the only organization that tracks this was just formed. So, I mean, otherwise you just have my opinion and many others. Okay, so let's think about this. I'm as I educate people and talk to more people and then talk to Asians as well, something I like to share is think about like the worst things that have happened in your life. You know, what is it? You know, a loss of I don't know if it's a job loss or rejection or whether it's cancer, rape, divorce, death. Think of those things and how did you feel? Many of us feel this is a big deal. I haven't been stabbed. My parents have not been stabbed either, but this is still impactful for me. This is the worst thing that has ever happened to me. Now, I have had a privileged life, so there's that, but this is big and I have, you know, a lot of my friends don't are silent on this, haven't reached out to me. Just a couple who have, and they don't understand that it's a big deal. And so I'm Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish, as I mentioned, and I don't know how Asian I am. There's a conversation of Asian. There's actually a podcast called Asian Enough. It's by the LA Times. And because a lot of Asians don't know, well, how Asian am I? Because I'm 75%, but then I have a white community. So what I have done to make sure that I am schooled and learning about other Asians, I've been on a number of Facebook groups where you have Asian Americans talking about all the different issues. And so there's 13,000 people there. There's 6,000 here. I'm on a Japanese American group as well. And there's like 4 or 5 other groups. So I'm listening to about 25,000 people talking about what are the top issues and what they need. And the idea that so many of us have nobody to talk to because we have to code switch. I had to call a friend from college who's like she works in the international district and does like social work, and she's Filipino. We DJ together. I'm like, Eileen. She's like, Jolene? You know, it's been like 15 years. What do you and I'm like, Eileen, I needed to talk to somebody about, you know, about the Asian hate because my white friends don't want to know. Like, it's violent. Turn off the news. They don't want to hear it and they don't understand it. And like, you're just like me, you're just like white. And I'm like, I'm not, I'm Asian. And so I've been doing a lot of research to try and understand what other Asians are feeling. And so that is why I'm trying to bring it here and wanted to express to you that the Asian hate right now is very devastating to many people, not everybody. And also people, there are also Asians who choose like, who don't want to hear it because it is triggering because they were teased. And so it's a very difficult situation. So let's see. You know what, Suni, do you want to read some of these?
There's just been some sharing in the chat.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori. You wrote about your friend. Feel free to unmute if you want to speak about it yourself. And then there's a question from Veronica about stats on the violence against Asians as a percentage of population compared to the violence against other groups. And I'm going to share the hate crime reporting training that was done last week. And King County Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Chris Wong spoke a little bit about reporting. There's some, dynamics at play because, as Jolene mentioned, most people do not report. And so the majority of hate crime reports are from Asian men and Black men and gay men. But clearly they're not the only ones who are being attacked. And then 60% of the anti-Asian hate crime incidents, that was a statistic I saw earlier this year, are against women, Asian women. So majority of the violence is towards Asian women, which is very, sociologically interesting. And obviously the horrible shootings in Atlanta, how Asian women are objectified, sexualized. So, but the and then I just put in the chat the Asian enough podcast link that you talked about, Jolene.
Yes. So thank you for that. Let's talk about reporting. I can't remember the Seattle stat, but there was like 4 hate crimes or 4 reports, of anti-Asian hate. I don't like earlier or something. I'm like, really 4? So it's difficult. The challenges of reporting is like, for me, do I have any evidence? Was it illegal? Like, my aunt, she was followed, but she doesn't remember, didn't see, what's the license plate. She was just trying to leave, like trying to get out of there and be safe. And so there's nothing really to report. So when you go to the police, and we should report it to Stop AAPI Hate. I still want to make some videos on how to, it's 17 questions. It's not that hard. Just haven't taken the time. But, I've talked to other people like in Linwood, this young millennial, and his father was hit over the head with a bottle, like some white teenagers. And his father kind of had a video, and they went to the police, but the police are like, wait, what do you want us to do? Do you have the guy? Like, so there's a lot of those things where, what are the police going to do? Because the police, it's already done. So the police can't really do anything anyway. And so it's just, there's a lot of things going on here. And for the Asians, let's say, who have English as a second language, it's intimidating to go to the police. And I don't know that the police are up on their Asian cultures or understand anything about Asian culture. At least I'm guessing, like out in our area. So it's a tough one. And I also know a number of Asians in other places where they have gone to the police and there were threats and it is on video, et cetera. It's just too bad. So there's a lot of like, we've just lost hope sort of thing. So Paul, can you mute yourself? I think there's a little bit of background sound there. Thank you. And Suni put in the recording of the hate crime report training. So that is good. Something you could do if you do have Asian friends or Asians that is help them report it. It's 17 questions. And it's in the chat to like encourage them to report it, because people only believe numbers. And people don't. So videos and pictures and numbers are important. Without them, people are like, yeah, it probably didn't really happen. You're probably seeing things. So we're going to share with you a number of expressions of hate. We have seen the violence, of course, but Kevin spoke to, there's many other types of hate that is out there. So I would like to share this with you so you can understand what Asians might be going through. So there, of course, if you think of, let's go through a daily life of like a average American. So you may do some walking and some driving, some eating, go to school or work, and go to the store and then go home. So, there's certainly graffiti, kill all Chinese people. And then this here, out on the street, 31% of the hate incidents are out on the street. So this, I think she's 89 years old. 2 guys set her pants on fire. Out on the street again, construction sign. And this sign says, start Asian hate. Asian flu. So this license plate blames Asians for bringing COVID. I'm not trying to be on here right now. Let's see. Let me just delete this real quick. So this is in our Chinatown. So these are the white supremacist signs. And let's say, your friend, your Asian friend goes to the coffee shop, comes back to her car, and there's a cup of urine that says kill, die China, kill. If that happened to you, if anything says die or kill, and it's in your property, I'm looking around, who's watching me, what's happening next? How would you feel about that? Let's say, daily activities, you may go to the store, go get fast food. So on these receipts, so this is, a couple of restaurants, CVS, Ching Chong, all of it says Ching Chong. So if you are going to get the fast food and it says Ching Chong on it, I am not going to eat that food. I do not trust that. So let's say, you're going to the store. This happened at Sam's Club. So this father and his kids, a 2-year-old and 6-year-old, and this is inside the store, was slashed in the face. All, look, a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. Where, and let's say, okay, so that you're back in the car, you listen to the radio, and then you hear this commentator doing this offensive accent and mocking an Asian American baseball player, which we just saw earlier. And then you're like, oh, maybe I'll turn on some YouTube. And then there's this white comedian who just abused and all these racial slurs and insulted the Asian guy who just introduced him. And think about this. So driving, walking, listening, everywhere there is hate, all different kinds of hate that says you don't belong here. And by the way, that comedian was banned from performing in Seattle, but his following grew and grew, like, because he was such a racist and blatant one, his following grew like much bigger. So this is at school. This is, of course, in Texas, and this is elementary school. And the question is, which one of these Chinese norms is true? It is normal in China to cut off someone's lip if they burp in a restaurant. And then the other ones were just as ridiculous. What a terrible miseducation. And this is a letter out to a nail salon, a Vietnamese nail salon, that says to all Asians, hey, nasty, blank, 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 get the blank out. And, this is just at their work. And then, so let's say, Asians are back at home, and this lady received this letter from this anonymous person who's celebrating the death of her husband and saying, now there's one less Asian to deal with, pack your bags. So are you getting a sense of all the different ways people are being hateful? And Mr. Chang here, he's Cambodian, and his friend, also Asian. They were living in this neighborhood, mostly Hispanic, but just them, they were targeted. And so their cars were destroyed. So these are all the types of, not all the types, but I think it's more, do you see how it's a little bit more invasive, and how there is hate from all the different directions? Okay, so let's talk about it, and let's those who want to read or who want to share your message out loud, or Suni, do you want to read some of them?
Sure. And Bill, feel free to unmute. I appreciate your comment here.
So I said that when whites understand that a hate crime is an attack on them, then they will insist that the police do their job defending all of us. Yeah.
Other thoughts?
This is Stephen. I just want to share my own experience, but I really don't know whether this is considered as hate crime or not, but it made me feel uncomfortable. I personally has experienced 2 incidents which were 30 years apart. The first year I came to the United States, and another incident is that it was happening 2 years ago when I was in Maple Valley. And the first incident was actually when I work as a social worker. I brought a group of the senior to visit the Salmon Island, Tilikum village. And then I tried to explain the senior because they're all Chinese in Chinese. Then I heard that, there is an older woman, white woman standing next to me say, speak English. And then at that time, I really don't know whether that is considered hate or not, because I never heard about that kind of term, before that. But I don't feel comfortable. I just told her why I have to speak English. I'm talking a group of, senior, they are non-English speaking. But after 30 years, when I was really visiting, another supermarket with my wife, and of course I talked to my wife in native Cantonese. And then there is another, tall white older man talk to me, say, speak English, same. So the question is, at that time, when I heard about that, I was very angry because I truly understand that this guy's not being respectful, but I also feel unsafe at that time because that could be something that might lead to some violence. So I think that was the very first time that I say the F word, to him, but because I am so upset and angry. So my question is, I don't know whether, when people told you, hey, speak English, but I'm not talking to them, is it considered as hate crime? But do I need to report it, and where do I report it? Just people telling me to speak English. But one thing that I'm pretty sure is 30 years from now, actually, there's no change. I mean, these anti-hate Chinese, whatever, still exist all the time, So I feel very upset, when I heard about this, but I think public, the way I handle it might be a little different right now. When I have more training and heard about that, how are we able to deal with all this issue. Yeah. So just want to share some of my experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. It's so important to hear Asian voices, to hear what that is. And I would call that a microaggression and would hope other people, it's tough. So microaggressions are all day long. Kevin, Kevin and I, Kevin is my collaborator here, and we're going to have a podcast coming up, and we just did a program also, and Kevin works in DEI. Do you want to explain? I have microaggressions later, but do you want to explain microaggressions?
Sure, I'll give it a stab. So
don't use stab. I don't want to hear stab ever.
Sorry, that's a triggering word. Sorry about that. I will attempt to define microaggressions. One thing about microaggressions are, I think you've heard the term death by 1,000 cuts. They're little comments with critical, harmful, even hateful intent that aren't direct. So instead of me saying, I don't like Buddhists or something, I'll just pick that out of the air, I will make little snarky comments, little mocking comments, little jokes and things about somebody who might be Buddhist. And then if they go, hey, well, what do you mean? Oh, hey, I was just joking, it was just a joke. So it's the kind of thing where a lot of times you walk out of a room or out of a meeting and you go, I think I might have just been insulted, but because it's not direct, there's a certain space for interpretation. So if I say, hey, I felt like Jolene just said something insulting to me, and then Suni said, oh, no, she didn't. Why do you say that? I said, well, she kept making little jokes about the fact that Black people like to play basketball. It's those kind of little comments. So, but when they start to add up, it takes a toll on people. And, we live in a society where it's not considered appropriate to be angry sometimes, or to really express how you're feeling. And then when you do, people will gaslight you. Oh, come on, you're being oversensitive, Stephen. They didn't mean anything by that. But the problem is that it's people aren't called out on it a lot of times. And so they continue, and eventually what can happen is they wind up getting punched in the face, their company gets sued, or they wind up in court or something. But then when you retrace, in the case of companies, sometimes where this goes on, you find out that it's just like with sexual harassment. Oh, it's been going on for months. finally just enough people said something about it. And so now we're being sued for $1 million. So I hope that explains it. It's indirect insulting, that's racially based usually.
Yes, and there's I think we learn a lot from the Black community who have like racial gaslighting. I don't see color. Are you sure that's what really happened? It was just a joke. It's not always about race. And I'm not racist. My friend is Black. I mean, I hear that all day long.
We had a Black president, so racism doesn't exist anymore.
Just want to share quickly, I can send this out with a follow-up email to Stephen's question. When we did the hate crime reporting training, to define a hate crime, there's some legal requirements so that there's a person's conduct is criminal, so that they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed based on his or her perception that of the victim's membership in a protected group. However, like in the situation Stephen's describing, that's driven from sort of ethnocentrism and xenophobia, not wanting and being abusive to Stephen verbally about speaking a different language. This is the non-criminal bias incident and harassment that you were experiencing, Stephen. So just wanted to share a little bit about that, and I can, again, I'll send that in an email, a handout about that in an email follow-up.
Great, thank you for that. All right, let's go to a couple of these things here. Okay, let's talk about impact for a moment. So I talked about this is pretty devastating to me personally, and it's not like I've experienced that much hate except for my friend's silence. So I was biking to kind of get outside because I do this 16 hours a day volunteer work to like do this, and I'm like, okay, need to get outside, get some fresh air. So I went biking with my friend, and he saw this black bag on the side of the road. So did I, but we saw different things. So with this black bag, I was picturing this guy, this Asian man, and he was cut up and sawed into pieces by hacksaw. So, and then put in that black bag. So that's what I saw when I saw that bag. And I see, all this news. And so, and I haven't experienced much hate really in my life. Imagine all the Asians who were bullied and teased and all that their entire life. And then to see all these killings as well. So there's a bigger impact than you may guess. And I wanted to talk about news. Like, you probably didn't hear about that murder. Have you heard of any of these Asians who died in the news? So he died in Seattle, this young the guy in the red, and this middle one here, she was a skateboarder. She's 16 years old and Simone, and she died a couple weeks ago. She was shot. Her aunt survived. And so all these folks died recently, but we didn't hear about that. It doesn't make the news. How many of you heard of Gabby Petito? Anybody heard of her?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so she is all over the news, So let's see. I mean, every couple of hours. And I was looking at ABC News does share Asian hate crimes, but not on their main channel. The Asians like Dion Lim, who's in San Francisco, and Sifan Kim in New York, they are allowed to share their stories about Asians on their personal page, on their personal Instagram, but it doesn't make it big time because that's reserved for this white lady here. And just to give an example, I Googled Gabby Petito, 414 million search results. Meanwhile, all these Asians, right, are killed, walking down the street, with a 16-year-old white girl was skateboarding and shot. You probably hear about that. So, so
Hey,
just,
Jolene,
yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
I'm sorry, I'm using the hand feature. And I like doing that. And I don't know if you can see it. It's a brown hand, which speaks to diversity. I think that's kind of cool. But when you're finished, I just wanted to piggyback on what you're saying.
No, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say that being that I work in the media anyway, over the years, for a long time, there's been a lot of discussion about how when crimes happen that are involving different racial groups, that Gabby becomes news because it's an exception. It's something different than the norm. And there's this perception sometimes with the communities of color that, you know, their neighborhoods are crime ridden and there's always shootings and there's always murders. And so when there's, oh, it's just another one, that's not really news. But what is news, and I'm not agreeing with this, I'm just saying this is the mentality. What is news is when a young white upper middle class young lady gets murdered, that is news because that's a surprise. That's something that's different. With the other groups, it's just like women who are prostitutes or sex workers or homeless. Oh, well, you know, that's not news because that's just the way it is with them, you know? And so what happens is it devalues the victims of crimes who are from marginalized or minority groups or communities of color, just like all the indigenous women that have disappeared. You know, do you ever hear anything about that? I mean, or like with the boarding schools in Canada, you know, a lot of this stuff is just coming out. And a lot of times you hear stories about indigenous or communities of color on NPR on a Saturday afternoon. You don't, it's not mainstream because it's not news, unfortunately. So I think it's up to us to really use our voices to tell these stories that don't get the same amount of play or publicity because of the bias that's there. So I hope that kind of adds something to what you're saying.
It does that. Thank you, Kevin. And also Lenora mentions no one has used the term white on white, the crime about Abby Petito. I've actually never even heard the term white on white. So thank you for that comedy. So, and I just have this picture here to show that hate is coming from all different directions. And so it's a lot. So if you wonder, like on one of these social justice calls, one of the white ladies has an Asian niece, and she couldn't believe that her niece was kind of like she was out of sorts. How come her niece is like, it was after the Atlanta shootings of the 6 Asian women. And she didn't understand like she didn't say what's a big deal, but was just like, she didn't get it. And so hopefully I've been able to explain all the different directions that this hate is coming from. Okay, and I am aware that we have 5 minutes left. So I would like to share this with you. I think it's really important. And when I heard this was in the New York Times. It was this big, huge article by an Asian guy at Facebook, Eric Toda. My people are dying in silence, and I'm here with a megaphone. I just pulled out the things that I really related to. No sign of concern, and no one is paying attention. No big news outlets, no brands, no influencers, no hashtags. Silence. It's not that we can't talk. There's just no one willing to listen to us. The myth has turned other communities against us, as we have been inappropriately placed on a pedestal. So we scream, and we're screaming at backs turned to us. And with tears in my eyes, I'm asking you to understand the gravity of my words. And I just, because I have a huge network. I'm a big networker and, you know, entrepreneur and all this. And so I have been screaming like, yeah, this is happening. Let's do something. Let's get the troops going. Right. Cause I got a law passed here in Washington state and also influenced all the states to get a law passed. And now we have laws against voyeurism. And I thought, okay, yeah, let's do this. My friends are white, liberal do-gooders. Let's do this. And then I hit silence, and I still hit silence. And so I think it's important to understand, you know, what some Asians might be feeling. And I think that a lot of Asians do feel like this. So I wanted to share that. What can you do? You can speak up. Here is an example of me sharing this post of how weird it is to see the Black guy in charge. And at the nail salon, the white lady is serving. And the example is me sharing and then my white friend sharing. So there's 71 likes and 41 comments and 14 shares. On mine, there's 7 likes. And so I think a lot of people think that they're not very powerful. Yeah, well, in this case, you are way more powerful than I am in many cases. And here's an example on Nextdoor. We shared similar things, and I engaged 15 neighbors and 12 comments. And he, white man, 145 neighbors, 764 comments. And so small things that you can do is speak up, start using your voice. It doesn't have to take that long. Lenore, can you share, it was one of our Asian allies, can you share the different things that you do because in support of Asian allies, because you are so helpful? Can you share?
Well, I don't do as much as I should, I'm sure, but I did invite a bunch of my Facebook friends to the group. I didn't get as big of a result as I was hoping. I think people are just they're emotionally exhausted. They don't want to get involved, too many issues. Not that this is an excuse, but I just feel like this is where people's minds are at. They're exhausted by the discussion of the social justice issues, and they don't think they can do anything. So I'm trying to work on that. Other than that, I just, I try to, when you post your tasks on your Facebook group, I try to respond and support like that. And, you make it easy to support you because you're very clear about what you're looking for. So.
Thank you. And I like to say, like with Lenore, I will say, here's an article, here's a video around this. Here's, hey, we're trying to put this rapid response to racist rubbish together. And she has comments for that. So she'll get in there. I don't know. It seems like every day, it seems like a few times a day to just like, boom, give some feedback. And it is so helpful. And many of us Asians do not feel heard. You can try this. Try sharing things around Stop Asian Hate and see how many people engage with it. You might be surprised because it's going to be nobody. And we have to keep sharing it. And a white voice is going to be stronger than my voice because you're already kind of like in the group. I'm othered. Go ahead, Adele.
I feel like people are interested in a moment. And then the moment passes. And then if you speak, you are just, for instance, we did a lot around Black Lives Matter. I have a lot to learn. I've made lots of mistakes, I'm sure, or, misguided, but that's part of the process and that's okay. But people like on Facebook, it's like we're here for a moment and we're engaged for a moment, and then after George Floyd, then things aren't as interesting to people anymore, or the time has passed. We did our due diligence, and for the anti-Asian hate, the same thing I think is if you speak for a while, people will be like, oh yeah, let me put that on my wall for a while, and then after a while they feel like they checked their box and they've done their deed, and I don't think it's over until everyone feels safe.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of, I don't even get performative. People are just silent. I'd almost like, hey, change your frame. It's okay. At least change your frame. So I am aware that it's 11 o'clock right now, and I understand people may need to go and do other things. I will still be on here and I'll talk to the few people who I have more things to say, but I really appreciate everybody for being on here, and we need to engage with our neighbors and our friends and start conversations. You can start easy ones on my website. I have different modules that talk about Hollywood. You can talk about Shang-Chi. You don't have to talk about like race, like, hey, what do you think about this? You could talk about things that are kind of lead into or different books, but we have to start talking about it and speaking up. So those who need to drop off, I really appreciate it. And Suni, and I'm going to, after Suni, you say something, I'm going to continue talking for the people who are still here. Go ahead, Suni.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone who was able to join for this time. And can we show some appreciation for Jolene and her sharing? I really appreciate it. And this is hard work, as you all know. It's emotionally draining, personally draining. And so it's appreciated for everyone's support. And as I mentioned, I'm the Equity and Social Justice Program Coordinator for the City of Shoreline. And if there's other programming or opportunities that Shoreline residents would like to participate in, please feel free to email me. We are doing listening sessions with different community members and wanting to hear how the city can be supportive. So please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Is that all right, Jolene? And then we can or do you want to keep going?
Keep it going. Keep it going.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. And when you need to say goodbye, go ahead. But yeah, so let's talk about what you can do. And I want to encourage you to make mistakes. You know, I'm sure I make all sorts of mistakes, you know, just all the time, but you have to, others, we're not going to make progress, and silence is killing us. Silence is like the opposite of what we need to do. So make mistakes, learn what you can about whichever causes you're in. Kevin and I and Suni are in all these different social justices. So I'm learning about all sorts of different causes. But let's say at Asian Allies, if you want to join Asian Allies, we can make mistakes in a very safe place. And you can ask whatever dumb questions you want. And so that's how we learn. And when you can be uncomfortable and like say, hey, you know, what do you mean by that? That sounds offensive. That could save somebody else. You're uncomfortable, but the person who's receiving like the hate. So a little bit from you can do a lot for the person of color. So to think about that. And I've heard from the folks in the social justice groups that it's rewarding to be able to make a difference. And when we can band together, like Adele was saying, she and this other person, you know, spoke up. We have to do that more often. And I want to give you some examples of on Nextdoor. So Nextdoor is a very toxic place, but I think it's just reality. So Nextdoor is an online neighborhood that's national. And I do invite people to get on here because it's not an echo chamber. So yes, it's toxic, but so is our society. And so to take a dose of it and get in there, so my friend posted an event for us. So Kevin and I were presenting as part of listening week, and nobody's oppressing anyone in your neighborhood. Your television is brainwashing you to feel guilt for things you are not responsible for. If your neighbors are afraid to walk around in the neighborhood, they've been brainwashed too. Turn off the TV, look outside and observe reality. So this is just like, there is no hate. What are you talking about? And I have just so many beautiful examples of this. You know, how about we drop the labels and just be Americans? You know, just follow the golden rule, treat everyone as you prefer to be treated. You know, all these things, it's like, yeah, but that's not happening. And this was the other day. Exactly what insidious assaults on our Asian neighbors are we referring to? Because there certainly hasn't been any in Lake Forest Park. And my wife and in-laws are Chinese American. One of our neighbors is Vietnamese, the other is Indian. We've lived here for 20 years. There's none. And so you have a lot of people just denying any racism because they don't want to do any work. They don't want to acknowledge it. And it is very annoying. And so we need other people to get in there and say, you know, let's listen to other people. Don't dismiss everybody. And so we need people to speak up. And then here are small actions that you can do. So let's say you have 30 seconds. You got 30 seconds, you can actually make a difference. 30 seconds to 5 minutes a day. That is actually very helpful. And I'm going to put a link here, and I have the links of what to do. And here's an example. So this is an American band, Tool Slang. I probably am saying that wrong, but it is in Cambodia, where they killed people. I visited there a couple years ago, where they killed all the folks. And so this American band wanted to name themselves after it. And then they also stole the picture for their album cover from the Cambodian museum. And it's a picture of shooting a Cambodian baby in the air. And so a Cambodian American from New Orleans, she and a few friends of hers said, hey, let's do change.org. They shouldn't have stolen that and shouldn't be named that, et cetera. And so they're able to at least have them not have the killed baby for sport in the air. And they also had other Cambodian Americans write in to that band and got them removed from a few places. So I thought that was a pretty good victory story. And this is the interview. So on my YouTube channel, I have at least 100 videos talking to other Asians right now and how they're feeling and what's going on. So we can do a lot, but we must do. Silence is not, it's not great. And what's also cool about change.org is it shows how many people you've influenced. And so it's like, hey, Jolene, 14 people have signed it. It's like, oh, I'm making a difference. So this is a pretty great tool here. And yeah, so Facebook frame, anytime you see Stop Asian Hate, read it, maybe validate it, and say something. I've heard from a few Asian allies where, there'll be silence on LinkedIn. There's an article or something, silence. And so my friend said something and the Asian reached out like, oh my gosh, thank you for hearing me. It is a big deal because it is still silent out there, except for the Asian allies that I've been able to attract. So here is the Asian Allies group. We meet weekly, and then people who can't be on there can do tasks like Lenore does and can brainstorm on different ideas. Maybe they have connections. And then Empowered Asians. This is a group, and Stephen, this is something where Asians can talk unfiltered, where they can share with each other. And it's not recorded and just kind of have a chance to vent, but also talk about what we need. And that's where also I learn a lot about other Asians and what they're going through and where they're at as well. And then on my website, I have these modules so you can learn about, okay, what is Stop Asian Hate? Why did it start? And so you have different news programs going through. And so there's like 5 videos on each, and lack of a representation. What is yellow face? And so people can go through this like a paid program, except for it's free. Because I'd want to make it as easy as possible for people to learn about what's going on. And I will say this topic is fascinating. I'm listening to Asian panels, Asian podcasts, Asian American, and it's just I'm learning a ton. So I think there is, if you're a curious person, there is reward through it. Okay. And I am doing, I do a lot of this education. And so if anybody wants to sign up for Patreon, $3 a month, certainly would appreciate that. And Kevin and I are doing a podcast coming up, and I'll be doing one called, Kevin, can you tell us what that is called, what my podcast will be called in your voice?
Asians Unfiltered.
Okay. So we're going to talk about a lot of these topics, and it's to have raw topics. Okay, so you can stop recording, Suni. Thank you everybody for being here, and